Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 249, our 5-year anniversary special. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensational sensei of the whatnot Segulin, and the Duke of You-Know. This is our special 5-year anniversary episode. This was something that, it's the brainchild of Gail Simone, the amazing author Gail Simone. She sent us an email and came up with this idea about interviewing us, and timing-wise for our anniversary, it just was perfect. She interviewed us at C2E2 on the show floor about podcasting and our history together and everything that, came to the genesis of Raging Bullets and throughout our experiences with it. So it was something where kind of giving up the role of host was very difficult for me, but she did such an amazing job, and I think this is going to be a real treat for listeners who are curious about what podcasting is, what it's like behind the scenes to do a podcast, and also just, as fans, what makes us have a show with the tone that it has, and what led to all that. So it's a very cool episode that's timely for what we're doing, and I hope you guys enjoy this as much as we did recording it, because it was obviously a very special moment for us with how we feel about her, and she gave us 40 minutes of her time. Actually, it was 45 minutes unedited, and it was just an amazing segment. And it was cool because you always have background noise at conventions, but you're going to see with this one, we were very lucky that the background noise was at a minimum. So there was very little that I had to clean up as far as the background noise segment goes, and you only get a few little pops and crackles that you would normally get on a convention floor. So I was thrilled that this segment came out the way that it did, because I think this is one that, for our 5-year anniversary, turns out to just be a very special recording, and this is something that I'm always going to remember doing. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Want to remind everyone about the Hero Initiative. It's heroinitiative.org. And also the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. I am a card-carrying member of both organizations. And if you go to ragingbullets.com and click on the charities section, you're going to see a listing of some comic book charities. If you know of any more that I don't have listed up there, please feel free to email me at ragingbullets@gmail.com. I always want to add those up there because I'm a big believer in giving back to the industry. And if you know of anything that you're like, hey guys, it'd be great if you put these on here. I always tell people with both those organizations, so even if you're on a budget, if once a year you donate the price of a comic book, if we're all doing that, think about the numbers of listeners that listen to our show and just podcasts in general. If we all are doing that, think of as a collective group, the amount of money we're generating to help these people out who have laid the foundation work for the comics we're reading today. So I think it's just a great opportunity for all of us to band together and do something nice for the people that, keep us coming back month after month, and yesterday and today. And I think that's super cool. I want to give a very quick shout out to dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com on this bonus episode. And actually, I'm going to share a little bit more of a personal response about them at the end of this episode, because they have supported us the past couple of years, and they're just an amazing sponsor. They support a lot of podcasts, and they're big fans of podcasting, and I really want to thank them for doing that, because it's something that helps keep our show going and many podcasts going as well. dcbservice.com is your comic book pre-order source, and instocktrades.com is your source for your collected edition needs. I'm going to say a lot more about them at the end of the episode, but I just wanted to give them a quick shout out and just tell them how nice it was to be able to chat with them at C2E2, because I just had an amazing time with them. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Gail Simone as she chats with us about Raging Bullets. Joining us is longtime friend of the show, Gail Simone, writer of Birds of Prey, writer of Secret Six, writer of a whole bunch of other stuff that we've loved on the show. If you've been listening to Raging Bullets at all, you know our love for Gail Simone, and we appreciate you coming on the show. This is a neat treat for our listeners because, and it's something I've got the shakes over because we're in a little bit of a different role. You're going to interview us this time.
I am, and I'm a little bit nervous too. This is kind of, but now, do I have ultimate power or what?
You have ultimate power.
I can ask anything I want.
Well, can I ask you one question before we kick into this? You emailed me with this, emailed us with this idea. Where did this come from?
I just thought it would be fun. You guys have had your podcast for 5 years now, and it's been an amazing podcast. It's been a favorite one of mine, and as well as for many other people. And I just think it's time. People have a lot of questions that they want to ask. They sent some through on Facebook, which we'll get to later. And then I had some, and I just thought we'd kind of let the listeners know a little bit behind the scenes of what it takes to do a podcast.
Well, you are totally in charge, so go with it.
Yay! The first thing I wanted to ask you guys, Jim and Sean, is what is the secret origin of drnorge and Sensei of the Whatnot?
Well, Dr. Norge went back to my elementary school days. Actually, we talked about this, I think, the first time we ever chatted with you. I had to do a play where I was dressed up, one of our priests, Father Baugh. It was his anniversary of being a priest, and I happened to be in Boy Scouts at the time, so anybody who was in Boy Scouts had to be in this. And he had a friend named Norge. Believe it, this is actually his friend's name. We had to come marching out to the Disney music, but it was Troop 21, Troop 21. Not that I'm having flashbacks or anything. And I had to stomp out like I was one of the Mouseketeers saying, duh, duh, Norge! Well, needless to say, when you are in 6th grade, that's going to stick. So for the longest time, it had a negative connotation for me.
I was going to say, and so you loved it so much, you kept it through your adulthood?
No, it wasn't. And then it eventually vanished. But in high school, I made the mistake of missing one of the high school dances, and I was supposed to go with a bunch of friends.
Shame.
Well, when I wasn't there, they told the story, except it became kind of a little nicknamey thing without the connotation behind it. So it stuck, and that's really what it was. So actually, right now, I find it endearing. So, and Dr. Norge, why is there the doctor part? I was going for my doctorate at the time I made the screen name. Norge was already taken, because it actually is the Norwegian word for Norway, none of which I knew.
Okay.
So when I went to go for a screen name of Norge, it was already taken, so I'm like, well, throw doctor in front of it, seeing I was so, and that's really where it came from.
That's awesome. Okay, and what about Sensei of the Whatnot?
Well, Sensei of the Whatnot was born from Raging Bullets. When we first started, I was extremely nervous, and as you guys have known over time, I have a lot of verbal crutches. And that first recording episode, Whatnot was my verbal crutch. I just kept saying over, I was talking yada yada and whatnot, yada yada and whatnot. And one of the guys from Comic Geek Speak sent in an email to us, and he was saying, if I hear Jim say whatnot one more time, I'm going to reach in the phone and smack him. And of course, probably the next show introduction, my buddy here goes, hey, let's make that as his opening. And joining me is the Sensei of the Whatnot.
Oh, that's
and boom,
hilarious.
it was born.
That's so funny. And it's true, when we're doing that, we don't even realize we're saying it because we use it while we're thinking of the next answer. I had a big problems with that when I first started with you know, and even my little niece, who was like 8 at the time, she saw something on television I did, and she called me and she goes, you didn't say one time. I'm so happy. And so I had a similar thing as well. Oh, my God.
That's why I'm also called the Duke of
Oh. Very cool. What I really appreciate about your guys' podcast, and I've said this before, is the positive nature that it has and how you celebrate the medium rather than try to tear it down. And I think most people who are true comic fans, we all love our comics and we love talking to other people about comics, and at least when I did with my friends, it was more of a positive, oh, this cool thing happened in this comic, you should read it. And I really appreciate that tone that you guys have brought to it. It makes it really fun and not tedious, and it's been wonderful. I had another question. How did you guys get together? How did Raging Bullets come about? How did that start?
I want to make one little comment about what you said before, because it's interesting when you talk about the positive nature of the show. That wasn't something that was ever an edict. I think it just naturally comes from the way that I read comics and the way Jim reads comics. I read comics for entertainment. The work that you guys do as comic creators helps me escape from the stresses of my day. It actually makes me better at my job because it is my escape from what I do. And not just my job, life in general. If my family's going through something or things like that, Jim and I talk about all the time how great it is. Actually, the past couple weeks, we both had a stressful couple of weeks. First thing out of his mouth when I was venting to him about something, go read Secret Six. And I generally I'm not just saying it because you're here, that was word from word. But I mean, those are conversations that's great that's what the medium's here for. So the positive nature of the show really comes from what comics do for us. And I think that's what it does for a majority of the fans. And I think it's something that, I think we're conveying from a fan's perspective, the view of comics.
Well, I think so too. And that, some people will get like a false reading, I think, on comic book readers and fans, because sometimes people speak rather loudly about things they don't like. But in my experience, especially, we're here at C2E2 in Chicago, and the readers have been fantastic the whole weekend. I don't think I've heard one negative comment in all the readers I've talked to, the signings I've done, the panels, the meetings with my bosses, everybody. It's just so exciting. And not to mention that Jim and Sean are just really nice guys, and that comes through so strong on their show. But anyway, back to my question. Don't try to avoid it.
Well, it started originally, I wanted to podcast. I had done Ian Levinstein, a friend of ours. He was doing a program called Geek Speak, and it was really from Comic Geek Speak. They had an anniversary show, their 100th episode. And I went to it because I was listening to their podcast at the time. It was great to hear that there were podcasts about comics.
Yes, totally.
So as a fan, I did a road trip to go to their 100th episode, and I met and made a lot of friends now who are podcasters from that. And Ian was doing, for Geek Speak, he was in college and he was on a radio station doing it. He was doing it on favorite cartoons. Well, we did a 3-hour episode about cartoons. And so a lot of you get why the show had the link that it does. I got the bug. And I sent in submissions to Comic Geek Speak, and I started sending in a lot of them, and I started saying to myself, I'm like, I really, instead of sending in submissions to another podcast and trying to dominate their show, I need to do something of my own at this point. And I talked to Peter Rios from Comic Geek Speak, and we came up with some ideas. It came from a forum comment in their forums. One of the listeners, Matt Kramer, I believe it was Matt Kramer, and I apologize, Matt, if I'm wrong. He's Darth Kramer on our forums. He was making a comment about what it would take to get new readers into comics. So being a comic fan myself, I'm always interested to see what can we do to get a new audience, get people who aren't reading comics now.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with the diversity of the product nowadays. I firmly believe there's something for just about anybody.
Oh, I do too. And all you have to do is find out what type of entertainment they like and then point them in that direction with the comic that fits in that.
That's where Jim came in. Jim, one of my closest friends. Originally the idea was for the show to be one of those where every week I would have a different friend come on who didn't read comics. And I was going to see what it would take for them to get hooked into comics.
Okay.
So Jim is one of my most reliable friends. If you ask Jim, Jim's just a yes guy. He'll say, yes, I'll do it, all that. So he was the first one, without hesitation, he was the first one I asked. Not knowing that after recording the first episode, we'd both wind up feeling the same way, that we wanted to continue doing it together. So the idea of having other people got axed after the first episode, which then means we started exploring 1 year later, was being released right around that time. We went through every single book that DC was publishing to see his reaction to them, because I was reading them all.
Right.
So it was fun to kind of go through a spectrum of which books was I'm liking that he wasn't. After we went through that whole cycle, it turned out he had this insane pull list. He wasn't getting everything yet, but he was getting quite a few. So we had to change the tone and the focus of the show because of it. So,
okay.
And then Jim, go ahead. You can go take it.
Well, I was going to say part of the birth of Raging Bullets really was back in high school, because that's where Sean and I really initially met. We had a mutual friend, and it was study hall in high school, and I knew him as that Narge fellow. At first, I didn't know his real name. And our buddy Bill's like, hey, why don't you come on with us after the dance? And just hanging out at his house and hanging out at Bill's house, I got to know Sean and actually learned his real name. Then we started hanging out, and then we had wrestling stuff. We were watching wrestling together, and it was just a friendship got born out of, you see this guy who's a funny, goofy guy, but then you get moments where I'd see the serious side of him, and it became a solid friendship. And so when he asked, hey, anybody want to do this, there was no hesitation, because I was like, you know what, this would be a really interesting, neat thing to do, because we did a lot of road trips for some wrestling shows, and on some of those wrestling shows we had some great conversations, and I was just thinking, man, we could probably have something like that going on as well. So for me it was a definite excitement at the possibility of doing it. And then that first episode, we disagreed on, it was Shadow War of the Hawk. And knowing Sean's love of Hawkman, yeah, I had issues with it. And we were going, and it was just this open discussion, and there was stuff he had no idea. He didn't see any of this stuff coming, and it was just this really fun experience that I was like, this feels like I'm just sitting here talking to my buddy.
Actually, listening back to that segment, we had done a follow-up to it, because he actually years later had read it again and had a new appreciation for it. He picked up the series. Because he picked it up as a kind of like a show joke, because he was like, I hated it so much, let me go grab it. He reread it and actually fell in love with it. But I listened back to that first segment. I was like a deer caught in the headlights, because I'd never had such an in-depth discussion with somebody before about a comic. So the idea that somebody wouldn't like something that I liked blew my mind. So I mean, it really, the show genesis was from stuff like that. And the tone has shifted just because his passion for comics has shifted more. I wouldn't say in line with mine because we may both like the same comic, but a lot of times when we have discussions, we are in very different directions as far as speculation, what we see in the comic.
Well, sure, and passion for it doesn't mean that you agree on every single thing either, you know. That's completely different. Well, how cool is it for you guys that now podcasters have a section at the conventions?
That blows my mind. The New York Comic Con, where we first were invited to be a part of the podcast arena there, is what they call it in New York. I was like, really? Be able to have badges? And I got to say, from fans of podcasts to creators to everyone on the show floor, everyone is so nice at conventions when you go there. Because I figured, we were going to be kind of like, who are these guys? You know, and all that. And people have been so genuinely nice to us at conventions.
Well, I think, too, as you know, technology changes and we all move forward, we can see how important the podcasters are. We enjoy them as creators. The readers enjoy them. And you interview us, you talk about the books we write, you celebrate DC Comics and things like that. So, you know, it has become a part of the industry. So I think that's cool. And the diversity of podcasters, I think, helps too, as far as getting diversity in our comics and getting different people's perspective on it. I'm very fascinated by the whole thing. I just think it's incredible.
There's a lot of creators that podcast now, too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like Art and Franco have a podcast.
Yes,
Mike Norton's been doing, Crankcasts for like ages. Jimmy Palmiotti has a podcast. I think there's just a big energy with podcasting, and there's a lot of different levels of podcasting.
That's
from
true, too, yeah.
wide-range roundtables to smaller, even single book-focused podcasts. So it's a great medium, I think, to celebrate this industry.
I agree. And then I had another question. This one's for you, Sean. How did you get Jim to convert to being a DC fan? Because he wasn't really that much of a DC fan in the beginning, am I right?
I knew that he liked Superman.
Okay.
That was something I'd known for years. It really was, I was curious to see, I wanted him to read everything. And I was curious to see what he would enjoy. I think he would actually be better suited to answer what was it that clicked for him out of the two of us. Because the honest truth is I hit him with everything.
What was your moment, or did it take a lot of moments, Jim, or what happened with that?
Well, I was a X-Men and Captain America fan as a kid.
Sure.
And when I went to college, a good friend of mine there was a DC guy. And he was also an X-Men fan, so we could talk X-Men. But then he started going, hey, read this Green Lantern. That was my introduction to John Stewart, was Green Lantern Mosaic. I borrowed his copy of The Death of Hal and just everything with the Parallax thing. And so I have a understanding of some of the DC stuff, but it was really, Superman was the only one I was loyally reading. It did have both universes where I was probably a little bit stronger alliance to Marvel, but I did enjoy, and I've always enjoyed that concept of Superman. And then I stepped away from comics completely. And when I started getting back, I was reading, it was a Superman Up, Up, and Away where he didn't have his powers. I was like, ooh, that's a really cool story. I was enjoying it. And it was Outsiders with Winix Outsiders, just that whole story they did in Africa. And I just started seeing different things going on in the comic book world. And I was like, it had a different feel and a different vibe for me. And once I started getting a pull list, I started adding more titles to it, and I started seeing like a family and a unity and a DC universe, and then I started going back, getting back issues, expanding the pull list, and it was just something that started growing partially from the podcast, but also partially because I was like, I'm really liking this feeling and this energy I'm getting from the DC universe. I didn't get that completely from the X universe at the end of my run. I kind of felt more like I was getting another X title. Okay, I got to do this X title. I got to do this. And I actually started feeling like a chore for me to keep up on the X titles, whereas with DC, it was an enjoyment to get more titles. Oh, I want to see this. Oh, hey, there's a nice connection. Oh, that's cool. And comics like Birds of Prey, where I had no idea anything about them. I had a vague understanding of what happened to Barbara, how she was Oracle, and I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, but I never really read anything about her as Oracle, and so pulling that, and then Tim Drake as Robin, it was just so many different things that it was a new experience, and it was just a wonderful time for me.
It actually led to the tone of the show in many ways, because as we started doing more of the issues, as we went through all of 1 year later, I was watching what books he was picking up and which ones he wasn't. And there were ones that I was really passionate about that he had no... Like, Birds of Prey is a great example, actually. We had many discussions. I'm like, what do you mean you're not picking up Birds of Prey? It became like a mission then for books that were my favorite, which honestly led to the tone of the show now. A lot of times during the week when I'm reading through my books, there might be an issue of any title where I'll pull it out and go, ooh, I really enjoyed this one, and it might lead to a show segment. A lot of times on the show, the problem isn't the titles that we get in. It's the ones that we run out of time, if you can believe we run out of time, that I would love to chat about because the issue was great that week. And I want people to know, hey, this is great because of this. And I do believe that people, if you're doing a critical podcast where you're talking about what was great about an issue, they can make a decision on whether or not that title's right from them, from your commentary on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. Very true. And did you guys start reading comics when you were young boys? Were you reading them then, or...?
The 60s Batman show was as a kid, I came home from school. That was always on after school. That was that and Little Rascals. And I would come home and I would watch those, and that was and the Spider-Man cartoon. Spider-Man. Yeah. So those things, and Super Friends and Saturday mornings, those drew me into superheroes and a love for superheroes, which then led my mom. If it weren't for my mom, I would not be a comic fan. She would grab me comics. And once I had my first one, I was like a sponge. I wanted more. We'd go to the store, and I would always go over to Beeline to the magazine section or the spinner rack or whatever, and I'd be looking to see what comics there were. And it was funny. Nowadays, we take for granted that you're always going to get every single issue of every title because there's comic shops, which is the great thing about comic retailers, is that you can get and follow a series. If you miss a couple issues, you can go and grab them. They're still available. Back then, there were times where I would read the first part of a story, and then I'd show up the next month, and that book might be gone.
Oh, yeah. And when I first started reading, I didn't even understand how the numbers worked. I liked the stories, and I figured the rest out later.
I want to know how come he's allowed to sing and you don't yell at him, but every time I try, you yell at me.
What did I sing?
You sang the Spider-Man theme.
You know what? I did it poorly.
Okay, I'll try to promise I won't yell at anyone for the rest of this podcast.
Thank you.
So sing away, Jim.
That's dangerous.
Now we've gone to the other
That's
end.
dangerous to do. But let me actually answer the question. It's funny because Spider-Man and the Batman, but it was more Spider-Man that was my gateway in because it was me and my two older brothers. And my brother Bill was a huge Spider-Man fan, so we would watch the Spider-Man cartoon. That was the only comic book that was really in the house was Spider-Man because my folks were like, okay, we'll buy a Spider-Man comic and that's it. And then some friends of mine were reading X-Men and I was borrowing their X-Men. I've always been a comic borrower, and I was reading their X-Men comic, and eventually my folks said, okay, we'll buy Spider-Man and one X title. And then it was one X title, then my other brother wanted his, and it was G.I. Joe. For us, it was really, as I said, Marvel was the introduction, but it was really kind of limited on what I could go with. So the other mediums that I could get, the televisions, eventually the movies in the 80s, the Batman remake movies, and that was always my medium for comic book heroes were the outside mediums, not the direct comic books initially.
Well, for me, it was the Batman show as well, and I remember the same with you. It was like after school and stuff, and I had a younger brother, and we'd sit and watch it, and I'd read the word balloons to him because he couldn't read them yet, and I loved it. And at first, it was just all about Batman, and I'm sorry for my brother, but I would always have him play the damsel in distress, and I would be Batman because I did not want to be the one who was in trouble. I wanted to be the rescuer, I guess, the strong one. And then when Batgirl came aboard and I first saw her, that was it for me. It was a done deal from then on.
How great is it to write Batgirl?
Oh, are you kidding me? I have a dream job. There's no doubt about that.
Touching on that real quick, I think it's one of the things nowadays, I think as fans, we always look for film and TV and all that whenever there's a show, like why isn't it affecting the comics more right now? I don't think every time that a new TV show or film comes out that it's necessarily going to generate to comic numbers right away, but I think what it does that's good, it just makes brand awareness out there, so people are aware
I agree
of it.
completely.
Like what it did for us.
I agree completely. Well, look, even what's happening with the whole Wonder Woman Mac line.
Yeah.
It's just gone crazy. You can't even buy it. They're sold out everywhere. Mm-hmm. We don't have the Mac line taking place in the comics, but it's more awareness for Wonder Woman, which I think is all great. My next question was, what was your funniest or weirdest moment on the show in these past 5 years? The first thing that pops to mind.
The Superman discussion. That ridiculous discussion you and I got on about reluctant leader.
Yes.
We went on this. It was a quick tangent. Either that or honestly, Muppet Secret 6, because that was. Well, I'll do the Muppet Secret 6 first because I think it's a quicker story. But Muppet Secret 6 was a throwaway comment I threw in there. I was doing my notes and I just was being goofy and I wrote a quick little thing about the Muppets. I didn't expect us to do a segment where we were casting a Muppet movie. And it literally led to that, and it was fun. It was just something where,
that was fun. I listened to that; it was hilarious.
But for us, as recording, it's great how sometimes you go off on tangents, and it's all generated from the enjoyment you had of the original material. But one thing I love about comics is, and it leads to a lot of our goofier segments on the show, it's not always what we're reading on the page, it's what it makes us think about beyond the page. And sometimes it can be goofy, wacky, sometimes it can be dead serious, sometimes it can be getting into a character's head. But it's something that I really enjoy about the medium. And the reluctant leader discussion for Superman.
That was a great one.
Because neither of us were budging.
And you were equally passionate, I'm sure.
The other one I liked was I pulled two really big swerves on Sean that he did not see coming. First one was with Watchmen.
You hated Watchmen.
Yeah.
The movie or
the book?
The work,
The work itself. Because what happened was, when we were at the Wizard World Chicago, and I was looking, I'm like, I don't know if I want to buy it. And Sean goes, I'll give you a money-back guarantee on that. If you don't like it, you tell me, and I'll give you your money back. So I bought it to review it for the show, and I wasn't saying anything to him about how I felt about it. And so then as soon as we sat down for recording, I go, okay, I want my money back. And I handed it to him. The look of just shock and surprise on his face.
The nerve of you to not like Watchmen, Jim.
He completely didn't see it coming. And I was then, as soon as, I think I had it going a little bit, and then I just started cracking and laughing because I really did enjoy it, but he had no idea. And then the second swerve, which I am still very proud about, was in the Batman movie. Remember when I told you how it was in the Superman Returns movie when I told you the one scene when Batman was sitting there in that cafe when the car goes flying and about to hit a crowd and Superman catches the car and all that. I told them that, oh yeah, didn't you see? Batman's sitting right there. I can't think of the actor's name now.
Christian Bale?
Yeah, Christian Bale was sitting right there. And he's like, really? And I had him going for a good minute or so. And we even got emails on that with people like, yeah. And then they heard me laughing and they're like, argh.
The one thing I liked about the reluctant leader discussion with Superman was the fact that, and similar to what you're talking about, it led to a forum discussion then, where people were talking about their feelings on Superman. Because I'm a Superman fan. Batman. If out of Superman and Batman, which is my favorite one, I'm a Batman guy. But I love Superman. I've loved him since I was a kid. The Christopher Reeve movies, George Reeves, on the TV show, the Filmation cartoons, all the way back to, the classic, very early Superman, the Fleischer cartoons.
Yeah, I know, me too.
I think the Fleischer cartoons stack up today as some of the best Superman of all time.
He's a great character, and I loved writing him, too. Mm-hmm. Some writers would say, he's too powerful, he's too this, he's that. Like, are you kidding? That's what's awesome about him. Come on.
And it's how he deals with that is just so awesome.
It's the stories around the other stuff that's so cool. My last question before we get to the questions that came in on Facebook, why do you keep doing this show after all these years?
I'll be 100% honest with you. It's the great comic work that's being put out. You wouldn't keep doing a show like this? What gets you excited every week? Well, I want to talk about the comics. And if it wasn't for creators who are constantly changing up the game, constantly trying to find clever ways to excite us every month, at many of the panels it was brought up about the monthly comics and the idea is to keep people excited every month with suspense. I'll use Death of Oracle as an example. I didn't know what was. I was worried for Oracle. I was worried, what are we going to do? Is she going to drop that role? Is she going to get a new name or anything like that? I totally didn't see where it went coming. I was sure I knew along the way, but I love that about comics. I love that I try to look for tidbits that authors put in there. I try to look for things in the artwork and all that. That's what keeps me coming back. So as long as great stories are out there, I'm going to keep podcasting because I'm going to want to talk about it. And it's something that comics have, talking back to childhood, from my childhood straight on through, it's something that I think this medium has been rich in. It's creative people who come up with new and interesting ways to take characters that have been around forever and make them new and fresh every time you turn around, and bring in new characters to the mix that change the game and throw up the cards. I mean, that's what comics are to me.
Well, I'm a storyist. I love the tales. I love just what I'm getting. And for me, one of the things that goes on in the twisted nature that is my head, I'm a warrior. Big time, heavy warrior. And as a kid, it's funny because we always talk about how the shows are very positive. As a kid, I was a very negative Nelly. In high school, friends of mine, we got together, and it was one of those weird lunchroom discussions where we were saying which one of us were the different characters of the Winnie the Pooh game. And everyone almost unanimously said I was Eeyore.
Yeah.
Because I was just that negative kid. And I find when I'm reading the comics, I'm enjoying life more. I'm having fun. When I'm talking on the show, I'm having fun. This is just, it's the accentuation of the positive. And it's just that I feel better doing this. I feel better when we're at the con here where people, hey, I love the show. Hey, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. When we get to talk to really cool, wonderful people and just, we get to know everybody. And it's just this great experience that I'm loving what I'm doing. It's so much fun. But it's also, I love who I am when I do it. And that's something for me that I'm so grateful to comic books. I'm grateful to this podcast. I'm grateful to my friend who's sitting right next to me. And we pick on each other, we goof on each other, but Sean...
We still will.
Yeah, and we still will. But, Sean is just this great guy who I'm so glad that those years in high school, I got to know who that Narge guy was.
One other thing, too, as a kid growing up, I was a very awkward kid growing up. I'm still an awkward adult. But, comics were one of those things where I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. So reading comics was one of those things. A lot of the characters became my friends. You could always rely on the comic characters gave you motivation to kind of keep going on and keep pushing yourself and all that. So they were very inspirational to me, and they remain that way to me. There's a lot of, I talk about bad weeks and things like that. Sometimes reading a comic book and seeing how these characters deal with these tremendous stresses that are being thrown in their life motivates me to keep. So, why will I still podcast? Because it's something that comics still do for me today, and it's never stopped. It's great to see that continue, and I think there's a message, no matter what age group you're in comics, that's for everybody. And you can connect with them. On our show, it's one of the things we've proven, even though we might feel the same about a comic book, it's for very different reasons.
Yeah, that's true. And in the years that I've been writing comics and talking to readers, it's been interesting to hear stories about how, for instance, Wonder Woman inspired them to get out of an abusive relationship or pull through breast cancer or get to the gym every day or help someone unselfishly and things like that. And I know for me, I really loved comics for a lot of reasons growing up, but I was extremely painfully shy, and I think these characters wearing their loud costumes, saying what was on their mind, kicking butt, standing up for themselves, because those were things that were so difficult for me to do that I really got invested in the characters and thought that was really cool. And it's one of the reasons I think I like writing Black Canary so much, is because she wears her heart on her sleeve. And that's so much the opposite of how I was as a kid, that it's fun to take a character like her and kind of explore all that.
I gave my mom, and I've shared this on the show before, I gave my mom from Mark Andreyko the Ma Kent one-shot from Superman Returns.
Right.
Which I thought was absolutely brilliant. I thought it was just a great mother-son story,
sure,
just showing her
yes.
true relationship. And I gave it to her just because I said, I'm going to be honest with you, when I read this comic, I said, I know there's some dark moments in the sense because she's very sad for her, but I said, when I thought of this, I thought of you. It was about a mother who cares so much about her son, and you got to see how it affected her emotionally. I'm obviously not going off in outer space and all that, but I said, I'd like you to read this just because I was moved by this issue. And it's something, she's going through her fourth bout with breast cancer. I don't mean to bring this as a downer right now. It's actually more to show the positive nature of comic books. And it was something she and I deeply connected over this issue. We talked about it, and we didn't, other than the fact that she's always supported me being a comic fan, we haven't had a whole lot of discussions about comic books, the contents of them. That was one where we had a deep, moving discussion about a comic book because of how we connected over that. So I think it's something where it's one of the things I love about the medium is that it touches people in a variety of different ways. It's touched me at different points in my life. What she's going through right now, I've got to stay positive during that. And how do I be able to do that? I'll read a comic book sometimes. I'll get motivated and charged up. I'll go call her and we'll have a chat. And, it's something, this medium is so diverse and so rich in what it can do for you on the positive end.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's wonderful. And so are there ever times where you guys don't want to do your podcast, or you're not in the mood to do it, or you wish you didn't have to do it, or...
That's a great question. It's the prep work for the podcast a lot of times. And when I mean like doing notes and things like that.
Sure, because you're both busy. You have day jobs, full-time, and all of that.
Editing the show and stuff like that. Sure. Recording I always want to do. Once the mic, it might even be just getting in front of the mic. That might be a chore sometimes, because we've got, like you said, crazy weeks and all that. Once we actually turn on the mic, though, and there's comic books in front of us and the conversation starts, I mean, it's who doesn't want to talk about favorite heroes? And he'll throw curveballs at me where I am so totally convinced he's wrong. There is no way it can be that. I will have evidence that I will ramble on about where I'm like, are you crazy? It can't be this, this, and this. Then it turns out it was exactly what he said. And it's listeners in the forum will be saying there, yeah, Jim, you're totally wrong and all that. Then Nostradamus here is right. But I mean, it's so the recording part, I've never, when we sat in front of the mics, it's never been phoning it in. It's always been a genuine energy about it. But sure, the before and after stuff, like anything, prep work for the show, sometimes that can get tedious and stuff, but that's most of the time. I love preparing for this podcast. When I'm done editing it, to talk about the editing part, the actual publishing of the show, when it's done, I feel very proud of the published work. The editing part, it'd be great if I had somebody that would do it for me. But I say that, and I'm a control freak.
Oh, I hear you on that. But your guys' enthusiasm definitely shows through.
And what about you?
Well, you are definitely a control freak, because I have offered multiple times, hey, why don't you show me how to edit? I can do that, you know, and I was figuring we could split back and forth that way. It'd be nice and easier. It hasn't happened yet. And
well, Sean, from one control freak to another, you might give that a try sometime.
But to answer your question, I'm actually going to make it really brief because I'm echoing a lot of stuff Sean said. I think the only time I've ever had any, called it homework sometimes, the prep stuff where I'm just writing down the notes. The actual reading of the comic was cool, and then I got to go through, okay, now let me make sure I get everything down. And it's some of the trades we've done where we've done these monster trades, like, okay, let's get this focused, and you got to just get focused. But once I'm done with it, I read over what I did, and I start imagining how the show's going to go and what the flow is going to happen. Everything just washes away. And then when I get at Sean's house to record, it's that same thing where it just anything where I felt like homework or work washes away. And again, it's just having fun with my friend.
Taking the joking out of that, the control freak part, though, is I might complain sometimes about the notes and things like that. I might complain about the editing, but there have been so many times where I'm like, how am I going to get through all these notes? When we were actually recording, I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah.
Because there's something that I would have forgotten to talk about. There's something that was really important to me. There's some thought just by putting it down that it made us go off on a crazy tangent or something like that was rich and something, where it led into his thoughts that I didn't expect. And then at the end, when I'm done in a published podcast, for me, this is my creative outlet. I feel afterwards very proud of every show that we've done. Are they all our best podcasts? No. But I do feel like I try to up the bar every time he tries to up the bar, and I feel very proud of what we've done when we're done with it.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think people, when they're listening, they might not realize that there is a lot of nuts and bolts that go into anything, and I go through that too. I don't necessarily love the process and the technical stuff of writing, but I love telling the stories, and I love my job, so it sounds a little bit similar on that. I have some questions that some people gave us through Facebook. If I pronounce someone's name wrong, I'm so sorry. I'll just do a blanket apology before we even start. We'll go through these real quick. The first one's from Gordon Demowski. He asks, with all the various other podcasts in existence, is it harder or easier to come up with unique questions and perspectives when interviewing or reporting on the comics industry?
I think it's really important with podcasting just to be yourself. If you're yourself and you don't try to be another podcast, you don't try to mimic anybody else, you're naturally going to ask different questions. It's going to have a different tone, a different direction. I think a lot of times the best thing to do is not worry what other podcasts are doing. I think if you're doing that, then you're going to get redundant. You're going to do something that somebody else does. I'm actually, and this is just a positive to all other podcasts out there, I listen to quite a few podcasts. I'll wait usually if it's a topic we're going to do till after we've done it, so I'm not influenced by it. But after I listen to it, I'm always amazed how we can all be talking about the same thing, and it's a completely different episode. And I love that. It's
that's
really
a good point.
joy.
That's great.
Ditto. You just got to be who you are. And one of the things I like doing is I'll respond off of Sean or respond off of guests we have on the show when we're doing the interviewing. So I kind of like the sort of Ed McMahon position that I'm in, where I just sit back and I kind of do like the sniper fire, where Sean's laying the thing and I like, bam, pick out this, or someone's comment leads to another one off a cuff question.
True. Okay, and Arvin Menon asks, who's your favorite comic authors?
Gail Simone.
You don't have to say that just because I'm here, guys.
Honestly, you are my, and this is not because you're here and people know it because I've said it on the show, you are my absolute favorite author.
Oh, thank you.
I think DC right now has a ton of creative talent, both on big books and small books.
I agree.
I'm amazed every month, and I think it changes from month to month. I'm always leery to say short list of favorite authors. I think the work Palmiotti and Gray, I've enjoyed their work since the Hawkman book, but Freedom Fighters, Jonah Hex, I think are just tremendous,
they are, yes,
amazing
definitely.
books each month. I'm sad Freedom Fighters is being canceled because I love the two minis. I love the current series on it. Grant Morrison, I mean, is a god. Jeff Johns, everything he does. But, as I'm rattling off all these names, one of the things that fits with yourself and with all of them, every writer has their unique stamp.
Exactly.
They have a unique perspective. Paul Cornell, Knight and Squire. If you missed Knight and Squire, there's a trade that's going to be coming out of it. You've got to pick up the 6 issues. One of those recommendations for Knight and Squire, if you dropped it after the first 2 issues, because a couple people told us that, this is a story that it builds gradually, and if you don't let it build and reach the end of it, you are doing yourself a disservice, because that was a super cool story.
I think everyone should read everything by Paul Cornell.
His Doctor Who books I recommend highly as well.
Come on, my favorite title is Secret Six. My second favorite title is Birds of Prey. There is a common thread. I created a musical off of the stuff he wrote. So yes, you are definitely my favorite writer. Not just saying that because you're sitting next to me, but to go off of stuff like Sean said, there are other authors out there. Like if there's going to be a big event, I want Jeff Johns writing it, because I love how he crafts his event. If there's going to be like a police or crime drama, I'd love Rucka on those, because I love how he really understands just that nature that is a cop.
I like a lot Eric Troutman.
Yes. Him too.
Yeah.
I really like his work a lot. There's a ton, I could go on and on about it.
I know, there's too many to name. We like a lot of them.
Terry Moore.
Yes. Mario Tiambeng asks, do you guys like comic books at all?
Do we like comic books at all? I've read a couple. They're all right.
And Cameron Hathaway asks, where in Japan does one need to train in order to become a sensei of the whatnot?
That's all you.
That's all me. Well, the path of the whatnot is not seen, felt, or heard. It just is.
Ooh, metaphysical. Kendra Bain-Smith says, did you ever dream you'd be doing this for 5 years, and when can they come back on the show?
Oh, poor Kendra. Kendra, just email me anytime. Your not being on the show was totally unintentional. I actually really enjoyed when she was on the show. No, I didn't intend. Well, because the original premise of the show was very limited.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah,
I didn't see it leading to this. Now I don't know when it would stop. But what about you?
Oh, I had no thought that it would last this long, and it was funny because right after the first episode, I wanted it to keep going on, but I never figured it would last, just because of life always gets in the way of stuff.
Okay, now I'm not responsible for this question. Benjamin Krieger says, do you smoke the weasel?
The weasel as in Pauly Shore? Oh, buddy. I'm going to assume he's talking about illegal substances, which, no.
Comic books, my drug of choice.
You did say they had a happy mood elevating effect.
Absolutely.
And then Mandy Siegel asks, this is the last question, if you could bring a DC character back from the dead, who would it be?
Back from the Ryan Choi.
I actually have 2.
Okay.
1, I would like to bring back Knockout, because I think she would be awesome. And 2, I would love to bring back Kid Devil, because I don't think his story was completely told. And
I liked him a lot.
He was just a really cool character where there was so many different levels of the hero who sold his soul.
My take on dead characters returning, my opinion, any dead character that a writer has something to do with it. I'm not a fan of bringing back a character that was previously dead, dropping them back into continuity, and then there's no forward direction for them, because then there's no purpose. I think any character who's ever passed away is on the playing field to be brought back, as long as the writer has a goal for them. and there's some direction for them.
Yeah, so just don't do it needlessly.
Yeah, but I mean, I think death is a revolving door in comics. I never want to see that stop, because I think that there's a reason for characters to die as far as emotionally. Does it sometimes get overused? Sure. Does sometimes characters returning get overused? Absolutely. But I think there's purposes for both. I think as long as there's a well thought out reason in both cases, it's worth doing. So I don't know that I have set ones. It's more of, do creators have a purpose for the character? Then I want to read it.
Right, okay, that's fair. Well, congratulations on 5 years, and maybe we'll get to do this in another 5 years.
Well, thank you so much for coming up with this idea. When I opened your email, this was absolutely the last thing in the world that I thought was going to be in there. And thank you for your time. When we were joking about this, I think we were both nervous about being on different sides of the fence and all this. And you could take over anytime.
No, I don't think so. I'm going home to work on my computer screen.
Well, we will look forward to reading whatever you're working on your computer screen.
Well, thank you guys, and safe trips home.
Thank you.
You too, and thank you for everything, by the way.
Aw, thank you guys for what you do for the industry as well.
Holy caffeine!
As we close out this episode, I want to remind everyone about dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com. Over the last couple of years, they've been amazing supporters of our podcast. dcbservice.com offers amazing discounts. And, a lot of times at the convention, it kept coming up with things like Flashpoint and various crossovers and things that a lot of times it gets very expensive with buying comics if you want to follow everything. And for me, I'm very lucky that we have the opportunity with dcbservice.com and instocktrades.com to pick up a lot of things at a discount. They are an amazing company, an amazing group of people, because we had an opportunity to chat with them at C2E2. And, there's people who have a genuine love for comics. So I want to once again give them a personal thank you for supporting our podcast over the years. And it's something that we really appreciate and means a lot to us. I also want to shout out all of you. This is something where we do this podcast as a labor of love. You don't make money in podcasting, and I don't mean that in a negative way at all. We do this because we want to be here. We love being here. And over the years, we've had listeners who've donated things to the show. They've donated money. They've donated comics. They've donated prizes to the show. They've donated their time, coming on the show and doing segments with us. There's people who are out there who are just the silent majority, which is the true of comics, I think, and true of podcasting. It's the silent majority of fans who like to just listen, like to just read their books, and they don't participate in forums, they don't do emails and that type of thing. They're just fans who just enjoy doing that. I want to shout you out and tell you how much we appreciate you. It's something where anybody who's giving us time on whatever level you give us time, it's something you mean a lot to us. When we see that there's people who are willing to listen to what we do each week, it motivates us to come back. I love recording, and I meant everything I said on this. The second we turn on the mic, it's like, whew, it's so fun to have these conversations. But all the prep work we do and the editing we do and releasing the shows, and this is true of any podcast, the motivation for that is the listening audience and the fact that you guys are here for us. Whether you're a comic creator, whether you're a fan of the show, we've been so fortunate that there's comic creators, whether you're DC or not DC, who listen to the show, which amazes me that you would find value in what we do, and it's very flattering. There's podcasters who listen to our show, which, you think with podcasting every week to take time out then to listen to more podcasts, but that's something I do. I love listening to other podcasts. I love the creativity of this medium, and it's cool to do that. I'm overwhelmed by forum members and Facebook friends and just the kind words that we get, and even suggestions about the show where people are baffled by some of the many goofy things that we do. It's really great, the interactivity, whether it's critical or positive or whatever about our show. We appreciate the time you've given us. Whether you listen to every episode, you listen to certain segments, it's something that podcasting this last 5 years has been incredibly beneficial because of all of you. Our next episode, episode 250, is going to be the first episode for year 6 of Raging Bullets. So we're very excited to air that episode. We'll actually have our first contest entries airing on that episode. Eli has a spoiler warning that's going to be on there that's very funny. Our show contest the due date is March 31st on this one. So there's details on ragingbullets.com. Consider participating. There's a lot of goofy stuff that we've done over the years that it'd be fun to have fun with. Your favorite Raging Bullets memories, make up Photoshops of us, all kinds of goofy stuff you can do. Be creative with it. something that we didn't have in mind, something that we didn't announce on the show, but you want to do, go ahead and do it. We'd love to have more entries for that contest. The deadline's March 31st. We're going to start airing Eli's next week, and if we get any more between now and then, we will be happy to air those as well. We also have some show voicemails I know that we need to air as well. That'll be on our next episode. We're going to be doing a lot of comic chat. There's also some segments that we aired from C2E2 of comic book creators that came by, friends of the show who we had a chance to talk with. I want to shout out everybody who stopped by our table. It was so great to meet all of you, and whether you're a new listener or you're a longtime listener, whatever your relationship is with the podcast, thank you so much for the kind words. Facebook friends, forum friends, email friends who sent us well wishes for a 5-year anniversary. Thank you so much. It meant a million to us. We really appreciate all of you, and thank you so much. Like I said, next week kicks off year 6. Episode 250, and we will see you then.
Bye! Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier